there's a term for people that are interested in urination. Water sports is the...
Yeah, I don't know what the file thing, what you would call it.
Urophile or something.
Yeah, something like that. Right. Yeah. Oh no, I've enjoyed that quite a lot and often. And there is a story on Risk about, well, there's a few of them.
Hello, and welcome to Adult Buddy Finders.
I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Greenberry.
And we have an amazing guest for you today.
Yes, we do. Kevin Allison from the podcast Risk. He's going to be talking to us about getting kinky.
Oh yeah, getting kinky, getting BDSM. Is that how you say it? Getting BDSM.
I don't know, but it sounds like a thing that we're going to find out today.
Oh, we're definitely going to find it out and a lot more because he has all sorts of stories to tell since he does host the podcast Risk, which is all about storytelling.
Yes. For me, this whole kink thing, like, first of all, when I think kinky, like, I think that's kind of like the generic thing that I've always heard whenever people are talking about sex in general. Like, you want to get kinky?
Don't be vanilla. Get kinky. That's the commercial for kink.
And for me, it's a whole world. I mean, obviously, we're learning a lot. This is season 3, and 2 seasons deep, we're like learning about the sexual stuff, the things that we haven't really talked about. But what's interesting is that you and I actually talked to Kevin years ago.
We did. We had him on a show. Yeah. Not this show, but a very different show.
Yeah.
Our Pinup Squirrels, which we did improv and sketch.
Yeah, night out. And it's all based on a guest. So Kevin talked to us, and what I think is cool is that was at least 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember some of his stories. I was like, wow, I'd never heard of it. I mean, I understand, like, even to this day, not everyone's like, yes, I know everything about kink. That's what I know. But it seems like he was talking about it in a time where it was really risque. Mm-hmm. Hence his show Risk. So it's pretty cool now that, like, we're going to be talking to him again some 10 years later.
Yeah.
And his show has really blown up. Millions and millions of listeners that are listening to these stories that he was inspired to tell, because it's like risky. So It's cool to talk to him and to me to kind of open us up a little more in this whole kinky BDSM world.
Maybe you'll find out if we take a risk. If Greenberry and I take a risk or what that risk might be. Maybe we'll have some risk in the future. I don't know.
So are you thinking that is there something that you're thinking as far as risk?
Oh my gosh, I threw that out there, but I was not ready to catch it.
I was like, I'm not planning on any risk here.
I mean, I always like exploring and trying new things. So maybe one of his stories will inspire me to try something different and new. I definitely... I love his stories about kink camp and these like kinky parties and whatnot. And there's part of me that wants to be like you and be a voyeur.
To be clear, I've never done that, but I have talked about, like, if I were in there, I don't even think I would be a person that would be like, okay, I'm going to get involved. I'd definitely be like, oh, that's interesting. Wow, look at you all going to town on each other.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, especially after going to music festivals, I love how much festivals embrace the community and embrace each other. And it's a very safe place to play around. For me, it was dancing and just going crazy dancing. So I do love that community and I love that atmosphere, and I'm curious to hear more about.
In your mind, a kinky sex party would be just like going dancing.
Yeah, right? Isn't that? It pretty much is just dancing with somebody maybe right behind you or in front of you.
Depending on how you learn about sex, I think that is an explanation. Naked dancing.
Naked dancing. That's how I see sex in general. That's why I always am like,
when
music.
Dancing, you always have music when you're getting it on?
No, I wish. I'm a fan of music for anything really, but especially movement. And well, sex is movement. So
You're doing it right.
Otherwise, what is it? I want to say
Starfish. Pancake. Oh, that's a fun new way to do it. That means like there's no form. It's not like straight out arms. It's like just like a blob.
Like, yeah. Covered in sticky maple syrup. So if there's no music, I just pancake it.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a whole... This is what's wild about kink, right? Is that it seems kind of endless in definition.
There's so much.
There's probably a pancake community out there.
I'm sure. Well, there's the whole thing of, which I believe is a kink, of people sleeping, having a partner that is unconscious.
I love it. Everything that you're talking about. It's like dancing. It's like going to bed. It's like putting music on.
It's like making pancakes.
it's like I'm a pancake and I get syrup, right? Isn't this the sexual awakening we've all been looking for?
I mean, can't you make everything kinky?
I guess so. I mean, that's what we're going to be talking to Kevin about, is like, what is it? How vast is it? And can anyone be in this? And
how do we join?
Well, it sounds like we just need to talk to Kevin.
I agree.
All right, let's bring him in.
Around with you.
Well, welcome, Kevin, Allison.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. We are super excited to have you. I've listened to Risk a ton and love your stories and love the risks you take.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan, Kevin, that you were talking about kink before. I want to say not before kink was cool, but before kink was like common. I know it's not super common now, but it is cool.
Yeah, the timing was really serendipitous because, well, let's see, we started Risk in 2009. And, I got divorced from my husband within the first year of Risk. And then all of a sudden I discovered this whole internet culture that was starting up around kink, which is how people organized those kink camps and bigger kink events, how people were finding each other. So it was interesting to, in my 40s, be kind of learning about and rediscovering, and all of a sudden it was very funny because when I got divorced from my husband, the show Louie by Louis C.K. was on television, and the whole premise of that entire series is, what's a 40-year-old divorced man? How's he ever going to have sex or romance again? And so I was like, oh my God, is that the world I'm walking into? But actually my husband, as he was putting his last box on the U-Haul to leave, he was like, oh, there's this thing on your phone. He downloaded Grindr, and that's the last thing he left me with.
Oh, wait. He downloaded Grindr on your phone.
Yeah.
Did he know what he was doing? He was giving you the keys to the single kingdom?
Yeah. And it's funny because when I got on Grindr, immediately it was just like, oh, daddy. And I thought, oh my gosh, a divorced guy at 40.
Daddy.
It's gonna do just fine in this context. So yeah, I was at the story Kevin Goes to Kink Camp and all that on Risk is really in real time me kind of newly discovering these parts of myself that I had just not completely integrated or figured out yet. And reporting it right to the audience as it was happening. And yeah, you're right. It turned out it really was at the beginning of a wave of more and more people discovering this stuff. In fact, I have found that kink has become even more popular after the lockdown.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people were getting creative with like stuff that they were doing online during the lockdown, which like opened up, lots of Pandora's boxes,
Did you find new things post-pandemic, like that you hadn't tried before?
That's a great question. Have I? No, I don't think I've tried anything. I don't think I've tried anything new. I have definitely become more experienced with fisting. Which is, like one of the things I find fascinating is there's so many people who are curious about this stuff. And whenever I enter into a conversation with someone who's young or just new, just like they don't even have to be young, I'll often find myself giving some warnings. You know what I mean? Like, oh, be very careful not to just let anyone fist you. You know what I mean? Because as time goes by, you hear stories about injuries oh, yeah.
Her butthole just clenched. Oh, very hard.
Totally.
Wait, so when you're coming into this, how do you go about it safely safely? The thing, I mean, it's a cliche, but oh my gosh, err on the side of over communicating. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you don't let people, make you feel like you're ruining things by wanting to talk a lot beforehand, because that's some sort of weird cultural idea that people have that, sex isn't erotic or romantic or exciting or whatever if it's negotiated. It's like we had a cuddle therapist come on, and it was kind of cool. She was talking about consent and how to make consent sexy. Yeah. And exactly like you're saying, society has kind of pushed forward this idea that talking beforehand is not sexy.
Nerdy.
But listening to her being like, oh, so what do you want to do to me? And, oh, can I do this to you? How do you feel? It was sexy. I mean, I was hot.
Oh, yeah. That conversation is really fun, I find. And, you also learn in that conversation how amenable a person is or how, nervous they are, all kinds of important things to kind of get a feel for. I was in Los Angeles a few months ago, and I had a whole free day, and I was like, I'm going to have some fun today. I'm going to, get on the apps and see who's around. And there was this fella who was super, super cute, and he was in the neighborhood. So it was one of those things where it's like, I can come over right now. And I was like, a little hesitant because I like for there to be, even via text first, some getting to know each other a little bit, even if it's going to be that afternoon or whatever. And one of the things he said to me kind of even unsolicited early on in the conversation was, I'm not much of a talker. And I should have walked away right there. I think that is like, big red flag if they say I'm not much of a talker.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And there have been cases where I've been with people, there was a case, this was years ago, this fella, he came over, African-American fella. It was very similar it was a very similar situation in that he was so adorable. And he was right in the neighborhood that I was like, he didn't want to negotiate stuff. And I was like, but I let him come over. And then like in the midst of play, he said that he wanted me to choke him. And I got a little bit like, I was like, yes, I can do that. But that is something you should have negotiated because a person has to know how to do that. That can be very dangerous if a person hasn't learned how to do that. And then in the midst of doing it, and so I start choking him, and then he's like, call me the N-word. I mean, he didn't say the N-word, but at that point I was just like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, these are two perfect examples of we should have talked about this beforehand because,
I knew better, but dang, you was cute. But I do love, you're like, it's never too late to say no.
Yes, good takeaway. We jumped in this a little, we got a little ahead of ourselves because we are fans of you. We know your work, but for the listener who might not know Kevin Allison, obviously we know about you and your Risk and your performances. Can you tell us a little bit about your BDSM kink? Can you kind of define that, or is it okay? Is there a definition?
I do like that whole idea of being like kind of a daddy. A bit of a. I like mentoring. I do like. Yes. I'm just naturally. I enjoy teaching. Daddy,
yeah. And I never thought about that. That makes
yeah. I sometimes describe it to someone as being kind of like a supportive coach. It's funny because I did this. I took a couple of hits of acid one night and was doing this kind of Jungian active imagination exercise. And I started talking to myself as various archetypes in my head. And I realized that a lot of what I do or want to be in kink is what I would want someone to be to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that supportive coach thing is like, I feel like I need that guy in my own head, a supportive, encouraging coach. So yeah, like when it comes to, a lot of people are big on sadism or humiliation or, that kind of thing. And that's just never going to be me.
I love how adorable.
It's kind of hard to hide that I'm a nice guy.
Yes. I was thinking, I love how adorable you are. And you're like, when I was on acid and fisting, it's like everything you're saying is like, it's like taboo, but it's so cute.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Something you talked about during Kink Camp, I think it was on the Filling the Void podcast. You talked about how you're because here you are, you've been doing this for a while. You've been embracing yourself for a long time and discovering yourself. You talked about that moment of like, I don't know if it happens still to this day, of that insecure person, that child, that, the person who needs that, where you're like, am I doing this wrong? Did I pack the right things? Am I the weird one in this weirdo community?
Oh my God. It is so funny. One of the stories I tell, not Kevin Goes to Kink Camp, but another story that takes place at a Kink Camp, is where I consent to do needle play, to be the receiver of needle play. It wasn't my idea. It was someone else's idea, and they signed me up for it. And I was like, okay. And then so this guy who looked like Santa Claus, I guess the way that they do it is they take actual needles, syringe needles, but they take away the part that would and put it not straight into you like acupuncture, but like through. They'll so that they're so that they're like piercings. They're like piercings. And so he put like, I don't know, I think it was like somewhere around 60 or 65 of these things down my chest. And in the story, I talk about how when he put the first one in, I was like, oh, no, it's gonna hurt. And then he did it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. And then my brain did that same thing like 59 more times. Like it was a real education in the fact that there's parts of our subconscious that can just be very, very, very slow learners, and so when it comes to, feeling insecure, I really feel like, self-confidence, self-esteem, all that sort of thing has been an issue for me for my whole life. And there are months or years where I'm in much better shape with that stuff. And then stuff happens where I'm like, oh man, I feel like I've taken a few steps back and I'm in a more insecure feeling place again. So it's like a complex that you work on, but you're never going to be rid of entirely. So I really do believe that if I, like, for example, was invited to a kink camp and had to go this coming weekend, well, it wouldn't be ideal weather for it here in the Northeast. But yeah, I can easily see myself like, getting overwhelmed with social anxiety at certain points, because it's funny, even amongst freaks, I can find a way to feel like a freak. Oh, God.
I do love it. I feel like listening to all your stuff and listening to you right now, you're a very healthy person and secure person, even if you go in and out of insecurities. Mm-hmm. And I love it, especially like the communication and embracing who you are and what you are and all of that. And so I keep learning more and more about how the kink community is such a healthy and beautiful community.
Wow. That is not to say that there aren't creepy people out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
The kink community, also went through, like, for example, I participated in getting someone who was a friend of mine, like, kicked out of a particular kink camp because another friend told me about a major consent violation, and then another friend of mine actually got accused of a consent violation, which seemed unfair. Like, it's very funny because this one friend of mine who was really at fault, like, I didn't feel like really like owned up to it. And this other friend of mine who seemed like kind of unfairly accused of something, spent like a year atoning for it online, and like, so it is interesting. Like any community or anything where like-minded people start to come together, some people will start to be gatekeepers, Some people will want to be like, some people will want to be like, a dominant is only this, or a submissive is only that, or that kind of thing. That's the old way of doing things. We do things a new way now. There's a lot of like in any realm, you have to like keep your antenna out for who are the really good people who I really trust,
Right.
Because I have, talking about the whole communication thing, I'm so used to being around experienced kinksters that sometimes I'll start something with someone who is curious, and I'll just get ahead of myself and assume that we're speaking the same language. There was a fella I met. It was after the pandemic or after the lockdown, like shortly after everyone was vaccinated, where it was finally okay.
Yes.
And this fella, and I explained on all my profiles that I'm polyamorous. And when he first came over, I started talking about that, as a thing to unpack while you're talking about other things. And he was kind of said that was cool, or he was okay or something like that. But I was like, I don't know if there's a real connection here. I don't know. I don't know if we're speaking the same language. Then we had sex, and it was one of those cases where there wasn't much connection happening between our personalities, but when it came to sex, something insane. When it came to our two bodies, there was something explosive and insane. So both of us had to admit, okay, that was crazy. Our bodies reacted to each other volcanically. And the next thing I knew, I was getting texts from this guy, like on an hourly basis of, who are you with? Who are these other guys? And, all that. And he started like making up stories about the other guys. He was like, which I had never even told him about anyone that I might be dating or was dating, or I don't remember, like, I wasn't even very seriously with anyone at that point. But he was, sending me texts like, I am much better looking than these guys. And it was just like, oh my gosh.
They don't exist.
Like fatal attraction here.
Right.
Yeah. Like I was like, oh yeah. He really didn't understand. I mean, people can understand literally what the word polyamory means, but a lot of people have a hard time grasping how does that work, and what are the real nuances of that? I'm
in that boat.
No, I totally. I am too. I mean, I have thought of myself as single poly for quite a while, simply because I guess the last time that I had like what I was calling boyfriends and multiple was, I don't know, in my mid-40s. So it was a while ago. And then I thought I had that happening again at the end of last year. And I'm not quite sure that I do now. You know what I mean? So yeah, I feel like I too, and when that started to happen in December, I was like, wait, I might have two boyfriends right now. And I might even have a third. So, when things are early on, it's you're not sure what's going on with, but you spend a lot of time in the early parts of a relationship trying to suss out, wait, what is the dynamic here? Is this really becoming something or not? And at that time, I bought like 2 polyamory books of like activities and conversations, like suggestions for people to talk over, because I felt like, oh my gosh, I need to brush up on this stuff. But it turns out, I think I can leave the books in the shelf for the time being, because maybe I, don't need to for a little bit.
I love that you're a comedian, and whenever you're talking about, at least in my opinions, of course, I think all of this is funny. Everything we talk about, I'm not laughing at you. I just think sex is funny. It's funny to talk about. It's just a thing that I guess because we don't talk about it much, it's like, we're doing it, we're talking about sex.
Right.
I loved whenever you started to talk about Kink Camp in your podcast, and like you're like, so I go there, and the first thing I do is anal probing, which is like, if you were going to write a sketch and go, no, you got to keep it grounded, Kevin. Like, don't go A to Z,
Well, that's the funny thing in that circumstance, because that first Kink camp that I went to was a pansexual camp. And part of the plot of Kevin Goes to Kink Camp is me learning, cisgendered gay men tend to go to their own camps. You know what I mean? the pansexual ones, you know, like, I mean, it's mostly heterosexual kind of sex happening, right? Of course, there are lesbians and trans folks, and, you know, there's a lot of all over the place with genders and stuff like that. But I was really thrown when I arrived at that camp to be like, oh, I'm not finding other gay men. There were some bi men there, but it really, really threw me because, you know, at that time I was 42, I think, and I'd spent my entire life terrified of hitting on a guy who might be straight. You know what I mean? Like the whole safety of coming to New York City when I was 18 was knowing that you could walk through some doors where everyone was gay. And so it was safe to hit on anyone. So yeah, like that really threw me to be at that kink camp and to be like, hi, do you play with guys?
Was it your worst fear? And, you know, did you find like guys going, oh, I'm totally not gonna, or were you like, oh, cool, there's actually more than I thought?
There was one fella that I hit on who, I don't think English was his first language. I don't think he you know, I think he just didn't know how to be polite. So he was really abrupt, you know. And then there was another fella I hit on who was a lot younger and hipper, and he was just like, sorry, you know, that's not my thing, you know. So that was cute. And then, as you might know from the story itself, I ended up, well, this person is now, I think non-binary, but Strap-on Joe at the time, at the time identified as a woman, and so that was my first time having sex with someone of that gender, because I wasn't able to make anything work with you know, men there.
That's what I love too. And again, like it is like a sketch that it's like, okay, really, you just go in there and someone anal with you, and it's also the thing that you're like, I'm going to be open to women. It's like everything that's like,
I know, it's everything's flipped. Everything's flipped. Yeah. And that was also funny. Like, I do remember one of the other things I tried that, you know, when I was like, oh, anal probe. Okay, great. I'm comfortable with that. I can do that one. But then another thing I tried was that spanking bench that day with this older woman. And I was shocked that it totally triggered this experience of being a little kid being spanked by my mom. You know, like there are things in our subconscious that we don't know it's there until it's there. And I was like, whoa, how do I find a way to make this end?
I'm like literally saying no, mommy, and I mean it.
Oh my God.
It's horrifying. I love the whole risk side, going to kink camp as a risk and trying new things, women, everything risk. I think our listeners need to take risks as well. And so it's great to hear you talk about it. And now we want you to take a risk and answer a caller's call.
Oh, sure.
My nice little segue. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for being open. And like, you know, you've been very candid about the pros and cons, like which happen in every relationship. And we're going to have somebody who has some questions for you. We don't know exactly, but we ask people on our Facebook group to like write in questions about BDSM and kink. And this caller was chosen by our producer. Her name is Lacy. Hello, Lacy.
Hi.
You're on with Greenberry and Kirsten, and we are here with. We're here with Kevin Allison.
Hi.
Hi.
And as you know, he has lots of experience in kink and BDSM and is happy and excited to hear your question.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm nervous.
Well, I'll do the nervous laugh together. It'll be great.
Okay. So basically I've been with my now husband for like a decade, and things have been, we when we were younger didn't do anything like too crazy, and we did like a little bit of that stuff and like maybe like different positions, but nothing else other than that. And I wanted to kind of get an idea of like how I could maybe introduce some BDSM, but I'm like nervous about it, and I don't know where to buy or where to look.
Yeah, you know what?
I talked to my husband about it.
One thing that leaps to mind right away is there's a book by Allison Moon. She's a friend of mine, and I love this book. It's called Getting It. It's a guide to like communicating about sex and Getting It. Yeah, by Allison Moon.
Of course it's Getting It.
And she has several sections of the book where she talks specifically about how to handle difficult conversations. So, you know, one of them is this template of like saying something to someone you're close to, like, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. I'm a little bit afraid that you might have this kind of reaction, but I'm kind of hoping you'll have this kind of reaction. And is it okay with you if I bring, you know, if we talk about this, as a way of kind of like letting them know that you're open to them not being cool with it, but that you're really wanting to lay out for them that, hey, this is a vulnerable thing. And, you know, I would like to like open up space for us to kind of like hash it out, kind of suss it out and explore together. I really find that it's tricky. It does trip us up when we feel like we don't know how to bring something up with someone. You know, another thing you can do in a much more like playful way is to say to a partner, you know, I have an idea. You know what I mean? Because it has that sound of, in the same way, like in comedy, improv, or any other sort of creative play, like, oh, hey, I have an idea. And then you
like, I have an idea, you could tie me up.
Yeah, exactly. like that. Yeah. So that you're presenting it as, I'm not saying this needs to happen. This is just some creative thing that came to my mind. How do you feel about that? You know what I mean? When people feel like, oh, okay, I have an out, or you're open to me, you know, having any number of reactions, but you do want to make yourself vulnerable and bring it up. You know, oftentimes people will find some way to get to a solution if they feel like that sort of open spirit is in it all, you know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leaves it open also for them to put their input in and say, oh, yeah, that sounds cool. But what if we not only tie each other up, but we also spank?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what else? Like, if it, like, how far do you take it to, like, on the pain level, I guess?
Yeah. Oh, what, with spanking, you mean?
Yeah, or like anything, or like what else?
Yeah, you know what? I would say that with almost all of these things, it's best to start slow and gentle and build your way up, and to not, too many people, I think in terms of like goals. Oh, it's not going to really be this until that, you know what I mean? But like, for example, like something like we were talking about fisting before, some guys get very, gay guys get very like competitive about it. Like, and it's like, oh my God, no, like it doesn't have to be, it can be whatever it ends up being, and it can be very gentle, and it doesn't have to be a whole hand or anything. You know what I mean? Like, start slow. I mean, some of these things, if you go really slow, can almost be meditative, you know, like can almost be tantric, you know? So yeah, I would say, you know, there are books out there about getting into kink. There's one called Playing Well with Others. And, you know, isn't it, is it called Babes in Toyland? Is that the store? There's a really good sex shop.
The sex shop, yes.
Yes, and it's like women owned, and let me look it up. Babes in Toyland?
If it's what I'm thinking of, you can go in and they'll have full conversation. You can talk about it with your partner, go in and they'll be like, okay, so what are you looking for? Here's some ideas we have for you. Maybe you want to try this. Ooh, is that too much? Okay. They're very customer friendly and kind.
Yes, it's now called Babeland. And if there's not one in your area, you could probably get on the phone with someone and find out, you know, recommended stuff around you. There's also Fetlife, which is a website that's kind of like Facebook for kinksters. And, you know, it's just like Facebook, it's a big old mixed bag. What's helpful about it is that there are like groups, like people who are interested in erotic hypnosis who live in the Northeast, or people who are interested in spanking who live in the Midwest, you know, that kind of thing. So that you can kind of find like-minded folks and start to, you know, people do a lot of like reference, you know, like, oh, is this person safe to play with? Oh, yeah, you know, he gets a lot of people recommending that he's okay to play with, that kind of thing. So you can enter into conversations with people over on Fetlife about tips and tricks for whatever kink you might start to find yourself interested in, as far as how to start slow and be safe, you know?
All right. Lacey, does that help at all? Or are you interested in kind of like going slow with your husband and see what he does?
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Even just like bringing up the conversation too. And I'll check out that Getting It book.
Yeah, I think doing some research and seeing what other people have to say is a great idea.
Yeah.
And also him watching you read that might be like a pretty big hint.
Just leave it out on the coffee table, see what happens.
Yeah.
And then one in his car, and then one in his like under his bed sheet. You'll get the idea.
Lacey, we really appreciate your bravery. We know this is a scary thing to do, and we appreciate you coming forward and asking your question. And thank you so much for listening to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Lacy.
Bye.
Do you want to help this podcast keep being a podcast? Well, you can. Yes, you can, because we are on Patreon now. So if you go on there and subscribe and give us a little moolah, we will keep making this podcast. We'll give you some bonus content as well. And we'll even shout out your name. Like, we're going to do some shout outs right now for people who have
subscribe.
Alrighty. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Kathy, thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, David.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Jason. We've
Oh.
got a few little subs that wanted their name shout outs. And we've got some good pay pigs that want nothing from us but us to continue doing what we're doing. If you go to our Patreon, you help us with microphones, with editing, all the things that go behind the scenes to make a podcast. We're not going to have to do it for free. We're going to be doing it with contributions from subscribers, from viewers like you.
I thought it was great advice. And yeah, I love because I think that happens more often than we realize. You're in a committed relationship and all of a sudden one person is like, there's something missing and I want you to be a part of it.
Right.
And sometimes that coming up can feel like you're being attacked, the other person. If you say, oh, I want to experience some BDSM, the other person might be like, oh, that means my sex
I'm not
isn't
enough.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, another conversation that might come out of that is some sort, I mean, if it's a monogamous relationship, some sort of opening up, some sort of parameters about opening up, because a lot of people that I know who are very kinky have a partner who is not at all kinky, but they've negotiated with their partner that this or that kind of kink activity they can do with other people. You know what I mean? So there's that sort of way of getting that need met, but they're still mostly monogamous. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're very open, and you obviously talk about this very openly. You talked about being the whiz kid. You talked about the anal probing. You know, the experience with a woman. Is there any story that you haven't shared that you think might be interesting to a listener who's wanting to know a little more about kink?
Oh my God, a story that I've never shared before?
I mean, no pressure, but if there's something, or maybe a lesser known.
Oh my gosh.
Hearing about, again, from the podcast where you were talking about your college days and like, actually you like kind of talked about the like prostitution and you came in and you're like, it was like a sharing circle and you're like, I did acid.
Oh, well, you know, I've talked about prostituting myself back in my early 20s, but I haven't told stories yet on the show or anywhere else about paying for it. You know what I mean? In my 50s, what I've found is that I do have certain kinks and you know, sometimes it can get very specific and it is rather hard to find perfect matches for some of those things. And so there have been occasions when I have either reached out to someone that I was kind of flirtatious with on like Instagram, or even gone to like an official like escort sort of site and hired someone. And it's really interesting because I have found exactly the same thing as with like any other, like, if you can really talk with someone beforehand, including like when they come over, even though they're on the clock or whatever, still just like talking things through, not just talking things through as in negotiating the play, but just like getting to know each other to a certain extent, because you will find that there are some people on like escort sites who might be not presenting the full truth. They might not, you know, speak English, you know, like there's all sorts of ways that you can all end up a little bit catfished or whatever in those scenarios. So I have found that if I was in cases where I was careful and kind of did some chatting with that person beforehand, both via text in coming together and then coming together for real, things, sometimes that has been like really, really fun and also fun because there's the parameters around it that's all it is. There was a fella who I did get a little bit I started to do that thing that you hear about in literature over and over and over again, where I fell in love.
Oh no!
It's impossible. Yes. But we were able to. We agreed not to see each other for like I don't know. We just stopped seeing each other for like maybe it was a year even, and then I was like, okay, I've got a handle on this now. I feel like I've grown, and I feel like we both expressed ourselves so much that I feel like we can get back together and kind of play like we used to, because we were doing a kind of archetypal role play that was kind of religious and like it really tapped into a lot of my childhood shit, right? Yeah. So I think that it was just that I wasn't initially aware of how much I was opening up when that happened. But then when we were able to come back together after the pandemic, it was like, oh, okay, I've grown. I'm mature enough to know you don't fall in love with a sex worker, and now we can have fun again.
It is because if they're doing their job right, it should feel like love. It should feel like a relationship, and that's super easy to complicate those feelings of like, okay, well, we do love each other, right? I mean, like we obviously have some respect for each other here.
That was the tricky thing, because when we met, it wasn't through an official escort service or something like that. It was under the pretense of him being like, oh, I like to be worshipped like a deity, as in make an offering to, you know what I mean? And I was like, that really tapped into like my Catholic, my former Catholic.
I was starting to probe a little bit more because I wanted to hear more on this religious, because we had a dominatrix and she started to tell us a little bit about the religious play.
She loves it.
Well, it's funny because, when I don't know how old I was when I went to, because I used to be super, super devoutly Catholic. In fact, I was kind of... I've always used the word groomed, but now the word groomed sounds so sick. Anyway, I was kind of being groomed to become a priest by both. My mom was kind of colluding with the Jesuits at my high school. And in retrospect, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize there were all these, they were trying to push me that way. But anyway, so I was a very devout Catholic kid. And I kind of loved all the ceremony and the art, and in the way that like Oscar Wilde loved all that stuff. You know what I mean? And there was a thing that happened when I was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old, where there was this gorgeous giant crucifix of Jesus, basically naked with just a tiny little loincloth. And it was a very real looking, beautiful sculpture that was on this cross at the very top of the ceiling of the church. And on Good Friday, they would bring a crane in, dislocate it, bring it down so that people could, and lay it down on the steps of the church so that people could touch him or kiss him or whatever. And
that is a kink right there. But what church did you go to? My goodness.
Oh my God. It was definitely old-fashioned stuff. It was definitely, I went to, I grew up in an extremely like old Catholic, like a lot of Italians and Germans, and I guess some, people like me, Irish and Scottish and whatnot. But anyway, I found myself in this procession walking up to Jesus, the cross, laying down on the cross, and didn't know what I was going to do. And when I got up to him, I fell to my knees and kissed his feet. And in that moment, I was like, wow, what came over me that was very dramatic, and that felt very, I don't know what, right? And so, all these years later to be like, oh, I kind of like worship play. I kind of like being a worshiper. And so, so it's that kind of thing that I would do with this fella, but also I'm a writer. So I love writing these prayers. You know what I mean? These things too, that like there's so much language in the Mass and the Gospels and stuff like that. That is so, or Handel's Messiah or stuff like that. That is so kind of glorious that I have fun with that stuff. And the reason it became problematic between us was because he was just like also loving it. You know what I mean? He got to the point where he was like, oh yeah, this is a huge ego boost to me when I'm feeling low.
I should just go on one of these pages and be like, I need worship just for a minute. And then my ego needs it. I've been rejected way too many times, too many auditions that haven't called me back. Just tell me I'm beautiful and you want to kiss my feet. That's it.
I mean, who doesn't love Song of Psalms? It's like, please tell me how much you love me. So where are you now, Kevin, in the kink community? You mentioned that you weren't like in a quote unquote relationship. Are you looking for that?
Well, no, I do have a boyfriend / partner right now, but he is not particularly kinky. Okay. And both of us consider ourselves polyamorous. This is pretty new. We've been dating since August, and it's interesting because I feel like it's one of those relationships where we feel like best friends, where we feel like where there's kind of a soulmate kind of feeling, but not necessarily that like swooning romance or like crazy, like it's very interesting. I have a tendency in the course of my life to look back and feel like, oh my gosh, most of the times that I was like head over heels over someone, or, felt a big crush and just a ton of like obsessive electricity. Most of those times that did not end up well. You know what I mean?
Yes, same. It sounds like you're dating the person that your therapist is like, that's the one. I've always heard this. It's like, it's not the person that you're like, oh my God, the sex is fire. It's the person that you're like, this is kind of boring. They're like, yes. That's your person. That's the one who's not going to burn you, or that you're going to have this is going to be a healthy relationship. You're like, I don't know about that.
And
red flag.
I do hugely appreciate that the two of us are able to talk and talk and talk. I mean, that's incredible. And I mean, that becomes like a deep love, you know what I mean? On that's, maybe not like a Romeo and Juliet sort of thing, but on a more like solid ground,
Juliet had a healthy relationship. I'm just going to put it out there. They died.
Exactly.
That's when your therapist would be like, no, you're going to die. So get out.
But how is it in your wonderfully healthy home when you're definitely a kinky person? So how and you're both polyamorous. Mm-hmm. How does that work? Are they okay with you being like, oh, do you exchange stories? Is it like what happens behind closed doors stays?
Yeah, no. It's interesting because I do know a lot of gay men who have non-monogamous relationships, and they have like a don't ask, don't tell policy. And I could never. I have to be able to talk about stuff. You know what I mean? So he and I have like every step of the way been like, are you okay about hearing about this? Do you want to, like we've been very careful as bit by bit we've shared with one another about other people. And, it's very funny because like naturally what happens is like, I don't feel like jealousy around that sort of thing. It's very funny. I was telling my therapist, I was like, I can be envious or jealous about literally anything except for some reason, sex and romance.
Like you're like jealous of someone's painting on their wall, but
of course they have that and I don't. So I can feel compersion. I can feel happiness if he tells me that someone he's been with is awesome. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But there's people he tells me about where I'm like, I don't know about that one.
It's not jealous. You're just like, that can't be fun.
Like I'm hearing red flaggy stuff there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Your partner's experiences are your experiences in a way, like it's an extension of your own. And so, when they give you those details and stuff, you're like, ooh, I kind of get to be in on it. And
right. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be a part of that. That hurts me already.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I said that I was saying earlier that I might be dating some other people. There's another person who I am still kind of sort of dating. He's young, and I think that I think he's having a hard time wrapping his head around the idea of polyamory. So that's going to take a lot more talking and sussing out. But he's very kinky, this other fella, you know what I mean? So it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that I really value about my partner is that it's actually been a really long time since I've had normal sex.
Yeah.
And so that's been yeah, exactly. That's been its own like rediscovery. So that's fun.
That's cool. I love it. And so just like for the listener who is like, okay, I am into kink. I want to find a partner like Kevin Scott. Do you mind to share how you met your partner?
Well, we actually did meet on a kink site. It's called Recon. And it's really funny because it's actually the original of the GPS apps, right? So it's what spurred literally all of them. Like Grindr was a ripoff of Recon. But what Recon is it's an app for kinky gay men to find one another. So it is ironic that we met there, considering that what we've learned is that he's not really kinky.
Hey, it's a great place to go if you want to be with somebody who's kinky.
Yes.
As long as you communicate it.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. I mean, a lot of people, what they come interested in, well, I mean, there are a lot of kinks that are not super sexual in the technical sense. I mean, a lot of people have kinks for types of clothing, like I know a fella who is just obsessed with wearing rubber, like he'll go out in public wearing full rubber, you know what I mean? And it's funny. I mean, he's very hot when he does that, but I actually don't have any idea. I'm like, I wonder what he does elsewise, because I think that some people really are just into some things that don't end up, they get like an erotic charge out of some things that don't end up amounting to like physical genitals and coming kind of thing. Yeah.
That's our goal. We definitely want to talk to more people that are like, okay, why is this? Is this sexy? And it's like, are you orgasm? It's not about the orgasm always, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh. These are a few things that I'm always insisting that expectations like that, like one has to have a hard on, one has to be erect, and one has to achieve an orgasm, or a lot of people don't even know, men, about like interior and exterior orgasms. They might not even know they've had an orgasm if they haven't ejaculated. You know what I mean? So yeah, getting over that, it has to be this way or that way. But also, I wish people would think of the word sex more expansively. There was a story on Risk about this woman who blackmailed this man. He was a blind man and he desperately needed a ride to school where he was a professor, right? And like various things had lined up in his life where he wasn't able to get to school. And this woman was like that. I guess she went to the school or something like that. And she said to him, she would drive him every morning to school if she could drink his pee. And in the course of the story, she's like, well, it's not sex. And after the story was done, I said to the audience, yeah, it is. Like, it might not be your definition of sex, but nobody is, drinking someone's pee for any other reason than like a major, like erotic fetish.
It's like
maybe they are if they've got crazy conspiracy theories about how to fight COVID, but.
All the things to fight COVID are very sexual. It's like teenagers that are not having sex but have done everything. I mean, they've done way more than I have, and not sex because it's not the P to the V. So that is not sex.
That was the Bill Clinton excuse with the blowjob.
Yes, that's right.
Come on.
We all know.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts around that? You described it as blackmail. Did she think of it as blackmail, or was she like, I was just having fun driving?
Is that the right word? Bribery, I guess. Something like that. Yeah. No, I think that she was. I think that these were two desperate people, and like she had like a sexual need that she saw an opportunity to get met that way, but that's not cool. That's not a good way to get that.
We're learning there's a lot of other ways. Because you've experienced there's a term for people that are interested in urination.
Water sports is the.
Yeah, I don't know what the file thing, what you would call it.
You're a file or something.
Yeah, something like that. Right. Yeah. Oh no, I've enjoyed that quite a lot and often. And there is a story on Risk about, well, there's a few of them of me doing that, but especially the one at the Kink camp where it was like something like 8 or 9 guys at once. And that was a super fascinating story because in that, I love moments like that where what's happening is so intense that your subconscious is able to kind of like slow down time. You know what I mean? Like I think that when we do get into situations where what's happening is a lot for the psyche, you might block it all out. You might black out, you know what I mean? If it's really traumatic, or you might just start to be able to like feel like you're in slow-mo, right? And during the course of that incident with like, 8 or 9 guys and being ambushed and handcuffed and all that sort of thing, it was a moment by moment understanding of how consent can change, because this fella, I would be like, I have a really good feeling about you. And then this other guy, I'm just like, no, you are not, you're not giving off respectful energy. You know what I mean? Like
and the taste was a part.
Yeah, well, then there's the taste. Depending on what people are eating or drinking, there's that too.
And I've forgotten. Did you know before that moment that you were interested in that, or that was kind of like
Yeah, I do. In that story, I do have a little bit of a flashback to the very first time I tried that, and it happened to be with someone who had drunk like an entire gallon of water on the way over. You know what I mean? So it was bound to be almost flavorless, because he was so flushed with water. But then the second time I tried it, it was literally with someone who had asparagus for lunch. Which not
the thing to eat before. No. If you're gonna do water sports, think about what you eat before. Just saying. Just like other water sports. You don't want to get a cramp.
Exactly.
Kevin, this has been really helpful. I think it's awesome that you're so open and that you've been open before. Being open was as cool as it is today. And in a large part because of risk. You listened to your spirit and it guided you in the right direction. And listener, as you heard, if you're interested in water sports, if you're interested in things that you're think that you have to dupe a blind man into peeing into something, you don't have to go that route. We have so many options just based on this episode alone.
That's right. I even do life coaching sometimes for people because like the woman who called in before, I have had people come up to me once in Austin. This couple came up to me. It was a lesbian couple. And they said, we've been together for 15 years and legally married. And we were all ready to get divorced. We were ready for a year of divorce when we heard your show, which caused one of us to confess to the other one, well, actually, I have some kinky thoughts. And then the other one was like, well, I do too. And then all of a sudden everything opened up and they were like, and now we have sex every night.
Our caller, Lacy might end up talking to her partner and all of a sudden you open that door and Kinky.
Yeah. So sometimes people will, so kevinallison.com is my website. And mostly what I do there is coach people on storytelling. But I have had a lot of people who have been like, oh my gosh, I like cross-dressing and I don't know how to tell my wife. Or there was a woman who unfortunately, here's the thing that kills me the most, and it happens a lot in risk stories, is when someone is an absolute beginner and someone sees that and really takes advantage of them. You know what I mean? That is one of the most, I think, tragic things when, when an older or just a more manipulative or sort of person is like, oh, this person has no idea what they're doing. So I'll just come in like a Machiavellian, whatever. So her first experience was really actually kind of traumatic. So, it's great to be able to talk those things through. And often I'll also often really recommend that people have regular therapists as well, Yeah.
And you have specifically somebody who's in the kink world, right? Or have a therapist who is.
I used to have a therapist whose specialty was that he studied kink and BDSM as his realm of psychology that he studied. And eventually I just felt okay, I feel like I've I'm okay with all that stuff at a certain point in my late 40s. So I switched to someone who is knows a lot about ADHD and, the cognitive behavioral sort of stuff. So I'm very happy with my current therapist, even if he doesn't understand a lot of my kinks.
And who could understand them all? Everybody is a very unique individual. We can't all be fully understood. We can barely understand ourselves.
I'm down with you.
Thank you all for listening, and thank you so much, Kevin, Allison, for being our guests and opening our eyes, ears, and minds to the kink community.
And all the different things that are out there.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It was such a treat. And everyone out there, be sure to share the show, Adult Buddy Finders. Get people on it.
Thank you. And also check out Kevin Allison's show, Risk, which is incredible. I love it. It's a storytelling show. Check it out. And we'll have more information in the show notes, also with some of the books that Kevin Allison was talking about.
Yeah, websites, links, it's all going to be in our show notes. And you want to listen to our next episode because our next episode features a woman who is a Jello wrestler. And she has bagged her crush after 20 years. So we're going to hear how she did it and what's going on in their relationship. So tune in. Don't miss out. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.